Your words are more powerful than you realize. They are not just passing sounds carried by breath. They are seeds. Every time you speak, you sow something into your life. Whether you're aware of it or not, your mouth is constantly creating. It's creating atmosphere. It's creating perspective. It's creating belief, and more than anything, it's creating alignment. Your words reveal what you agree with in your spirit. So when your mouth opens, what flows out is not casual, it's spiritual. It's not simply expressive, it's formative. Your life is becoming what your words are declaring. There are moments when we let words slip because we're hurt, because we're angry, because we feel unseen, unheard, or unloved. And in those moments, the mouth becomes a weapon, a tool of self-sabotage. Without even meaning to, we speak failure over our future, judgment over our journey, and fear over our faith. We say things like, I always mess up, or nothing ever works out for me, or I'm not good enough. Not realizing we are watering weeds with our own voice, we are reinforcing the very cycles we're trying to escape, because what you say has the power to settle. Words settle into your mind, they settle into your subconscious. They settle into your identity, and then you begin to live out what you've settled into, and the danger is words don't ask for your permission before they take root. They just need your repetition, that's all. Speak it enough times, and it starts to become your truth. You might have said it as a joke, you might have said it in frustration, but if you keep saying it, your spirit starts believing it, and when your spirit believes it, your life begins to mirror it. What you say reveals what you've allowed yourself to believe. If you keep saying you're tired, you will always feel drained. If you keep saying you're stuck, you will resist every opportunity to move forward. If you keep saying nothing will change, you will begin to sabotage everything that tries to help you grow. Your words have creative power. They don't just describe your reality, they shape it. Your mouth is producing fruit whether you realize it or not. The question is, what kind? If you plant bitterness, you'll reap brokenness. If you plant fear, you'll reap paralysis. If you plant shame, you'll reap silence. But if you plant hope, you'll reap resilience. If you plant gratitude, you'll reap joy. If you plant faith, you'll reap miracles, and planting starts with your mouth. What are you planting today? There's a reason why Scripture says life and death are in the power of the tongue. That's not a metaphor. That's a law. Just like gravity doesn't care if you believe in it, the law of your tongue doesn't wait for your awareness to work. It's working even in ignorance. It's working while you're complaining. It's working while you're venting. It's working while you're speaking carelessly into your own life, and it's not just working on you. It's working around you. It's shaping how people perceive you. It's influencing the kind of people you attract. It's affecting your relationships, your energy, your mood, and your decisions, all because of words. Now, some of us were raised in environments where negative speech was normalized. Maybe all you heard growing up was sarcasm, criticism, or hopelessness. So now, you don't even notice the negative patterns in your speech. You don't notice that you're tearing yourself down every time you speak. You don't notice that you're reinforcing fear and anxiety with every conversation. But just because something is familiar doesn't mean it's fruitful. You have to make a conscious choice to reprogram your language. You have to decide that you will no longer use your mouth to curse what God is trying to bless. Sometimes the most spiritual warfare you'll ever do is learning how to talk differently, not just to others, but to yourself, especially to yourself. Because if you're like most people, the person you talk to the most is you. That voice in your head, that voice has the most access. That voice hears every word before it ever leaves your mouth. And when you speak those words out loud, you are reinforcing that inner agreement. You are multiplying the energy behind your thoughts and making them real. Think about that. You are making thoughts real. Thoughts, which are invisible, become concrete once they are spoken. That's why certain words have the power to linger. They echo. They stay in the room even after the conversation is over. That's not just poetic, it's spiritual law. Spoken words are containers of energy. Once they're released, they don't disappear, they move. They land, they grow, and eventually they show up in your actions and outcomes. And here's the other thing. Your words train your emotions. Your words teach your heart how to feel. If you keep talking about your pain will stay at the center of your identity. If you keep talking about what you lack, Your mind will train itself to ignore what you already have. If you keep talking about fear, your nervous system will live in a constant state of threat. But if you start speaking peace even when you feel pressure, your body begins to believe that peace is possible. If you start speaking victory even when you feel vulnerable, your spirit will rise to match the new belief. This is not about denial. This is about direction. You're not ignoring reality. You're choosing which reality to amplify. There is always pain, but there is also power. There is always lack, but there is also grace. There is always fear, but there is also faith, and whichever one you speak more of will grow more rapidly in your life. You feed what you focus on, and focus is expressed through speech. That's why it's not enough to think differently. You must speak differently, because your mind may have new thoughts, but if your mouth keeps repeating old words, your life will stay stuck. There is a disconnect when your thoughts are hopeful, but your words are bitter. That split will rob you of alignment. It will keep you double-minded, and a double-minded person is unstable in all their ways. You've got to bring your mouth into agreement with the vision, even when your feelings haven't caught up yet. Even when your situation still looks the same, even when your emotions are raw, speak with intention, speak with clarity, speak as if the breakthrough is already on the way, because it is. Your words are seeds. And if you keep planting in the same soil with the same language, you will keep harvesting the same cycle. So if you want to overcome the cycle of negative feelings, the first place you need to look is not your heart, not your habits, but your mouth. Because whatever keeps coming out of your mouth is a reflection of what you've chosen to let live inside of you, and you don't have to keep letting it live there. You have the authority to evict every lie, every limiting belief, every word curse that ever came out of your mouth or someone else's. But you don't fight thoughts with silence. You fight them with truth, and truth has to be spoken, even if it's in a whisper at first, even if your voice shakes, even if your mind fights back. Keep speaking it. Keep planting it, because the harvest is coming. The mouth never lies about the condition of the mind. What comes out of your mouth is always a reflection of what's been rehearsed in your thoughts. People don't just say things randomly. They speak what they've been silently practicing in the privacy of their minds. That internal monologue, it becomes external dialogue. And if your thoughts are filled with fear, regret, bitterness, self-doubt, or shame, your mouth will eventually betray you. It will start speaking those feelings into your relationships, into your environment, and most dangerously, into your own identity. There is a loop happening between the mind and the mouth. It's not just that the mouth expresses thoughts, it strengthens them. Every time you say something negative, you're not just letting it out, you're feeding it back into your system, you're reinforcing it. Your mind says, I feel like I'm not enough. Your mouth repeats, I'll never measure up. And when you say that, your mind hears it again, not as a passing idea, but as confirmation, and this loop gets tighter. You say what you think, you believe what you say, you act based on that belief, and then your experience reinforces the original thought. This is how strongholds are built, not in an instant, but in repetition. One repeated thought becomes a belief, one belief becomes a story, one story becomes your identity, and your identity becomes the lens through which you see everything in life. That's why when someone tries to encourage you, you struggle to receive it. Their words are trying to plant seeds of faith, but your inner rehearsals are choking the soil. You've been rehearsing the lie too long. You've been telling yourself how unqualified you are, how broken you are, how nothing ever changes, and now those words live on autopilot. Even when life gives you something good, your mouth rushes to disqualify it. You deflect compliments, you downplay blessings, you anticipate failure, and not because you're trying to be humble, but because your thoughts have trained your mouth to expect disappointment. You're not speaking truth, you're speaking patterns. Old patterns, painful patterns, patterns you didn't even choose, but inherited, patterns that were passed down through trauma, through neglect, through what wasn't said to you when you needed affirmation. And now your mouth is echoing pain that wasn't even yours to carry in the first place. This is why the first battlefield of emotional healing is the mind, but the first sign of victory is the mouth. When your language starts to shift, it's a sign that your thinking is being renewed. But here's the thing, you don't have to wait until your thoughts are perfect to start changing your language. You can flip the pattern, you can interrupt the loop, you can begin to speak new words, not because you feel them, but because you've decided to believe them. Speak them while you're still unsure. Speak them when you feel weak. Speak them when the evidence says otherwise, because the more you say it, the more your mind will begin to listen. You've listened to fear long enough. You've listened to the inner critic long enough. You've listened to old stories that no longer serve the version of you that's trying to rise. But here's the secret. Your mind believes your voice more than anyone else's. You can listen to sermons, podcasts, and affirmations all day, but until you open your mouth and declare something new, the old rehearsals will keep winning. You don't have to feel strong to say, I am getting stronger. You don't have to feel healed to say, I am on the path to healing. You don't have to feel qualified to say, I am equipped for this moment. That's not faking it. That's planting it. That's preparing the atmosphere of your life to receive something new. You are no longer aligning with the voice of your wounds. You are aligning with the voice of your becoming. And let's talk about silence for a moment, because some people don't rehearse negativity with loud words. They rehearse it with silence. You may not say much out loud, but your mind is still busy. You don't speak defeat to others, but inside the tape is playing. You're not smart enough, you'll never make it, why bother trying? And because you never say it out loud, you never challenge it, you just live under it. You walk through life carrying this unspoken narrative that keeps you small, that keeps you afraid, that keeps you isolated. That silence is a killer, because unspoken lies still have power if you believe them. But when you start to bring those internal rehearsals into the light, when you start to contradict them with truth, spoken truth, you break their grip. You reclaim the authority over your own mind. You tell your thoughts, you don't run this. You don't get to narrate my life anymore. And it may feel awkward at first. It may feel unnatural. But what's unnatural at first becomes normal through repetition. Just like you practice negative thinking, you can practice powerful speech. Not toxic positivity, not empty slogans, but rooted, intentional, aligned declarations that match the future you're stepping into. You have to train your mouth the same way you train a muscle. It will want to default to what's familiar. It will want to speak what's easy, what's emotional, what's reactive. But you don't have to surrender to that reflex. You can pause, you can breathe, you can ask, is what I'm about to say building the future I want to see? And if the answer is no, you have the power to choose a new sentence, one sentence, that's all it takes to start. One decision to say something different than what your feelings demand. You may not change your whole life in a sentence, but you can change your direction, and direction matters more than speed. This is where emotional maturity starts, not when you feel perfect, but when you choose to speak with purpose, when you refuse to let your emotions have the mic, when you decide that your mouth will no longer be a mirror of pain, but a megaphone for progress. You can speak as if you already are who you're becoming, not because you're pretending, but because you are practicing the truth. And the truth is, you were never created to rehearse defeat. You were never designed to replay fear. You were created to declare, to affirm, to edify, to build. Your mouth is meant for more than survival. It's meant for strategy. It's meant for victory. And victory begins with your voice. There comes a point in your life when you have to realize that you can't keep repeating the same script and expect a new story. If the words coming out of your mouth are drenched in shame, defeat, self, pity, and fear, then you're holding yourself hostage to a past that no longer serves your future. The script that plays in your head, the one you've been rehearsing since childhood, since that heartbreak, since that failure, that script becomes the narrator of your emotions, and what you speak out loud becomes the soundtrack of your spiritual life. If you're constantly speaking as if you're broken, stuck, unwanted, or forgotten, then you're reinforcing those emotions, giving them authority they don't deserve. The truth is, you have the power to shift the script. You don't have to keep reading the same tired lines that were handed to you by pain, trauma, or insecurity. You don't have to let old words shape new seasons. You can decide today to rewrite the narrative by shifting what you speak. This isn't about faking confidence. It's about breaking agreement with the lies you've spoken so long that they started sounding like truth. It's about choosing language that elevates your spirit rather than imprisons your soul. It's about saying things that sound like where you're going, not where you've been, because your mouth is a tool. It's either building or breaking, creating or destroying, lifting or limiting. You can't keep saying, "I'll never get through this," and then be surprised when your strength doesn't show up. You can't keep saying, "I'm just not that type of person," and then wonder why you feel trapped in your own identity. Your script is your spell. Whatever you speak, you reinforce. And the more you speak defeat, the more your mind internalizes that language, turning it into belief, and belief becomes behavior. That's why people feel stuck. They think it's circumstance, but it's often just recycled language keeping them bound. We don't rise beyond the words we use to define ourselves. You can have potential, dreams, divine purpose. But if your words are tethered to limitation, you will never give yourself permission to step into the new. And what's wild is that most people are unaware of the power they've given to their own script. They'll say things like, "That's just how I am," or "I'm just being real," not realizing that authenticity without growth becomes bondage. Being real about your pain is one thing. Staying stuck in it because your words won't let you grow, that's self-sabotage. You've got to stop giving your past the mic. Stop letting your mouth be an echo of your wounds. Stop repeating phrases that were born from fear, insecurity, or rejection. Because if the enemy can't stop your purpose, he'll try to distort your language. If he can keep your mouth rehearsing discouragement, then he doesn't have to steal your future. You'll talk yourself out of it. Some of the most dangerous warfare isn't external. It's in the everyday sentences you've normalized. The ones that start with "I can't," or "I'll never," or "That's just too hard." That script is not just shaping your emotions. It's shaping your decisions, your relationships, your energy, and your expectations. You cannot feel like royalty if you talk like a prisoner. You cannot walk in purpose if your words are filled with passivity. You cannot embrace joy when your mouth is constantly rehearsing sorrow. That doesn't mean you ignore pain or pretend life isn't hard. It means you choose not to let pain write the script of your daily language. You honor your feelings, but you speak in alignment with your healing, because your healing doesn't just come from what you feel, it comes from what you decide to say over yourself, especially when everything around you still looks the same. That's why faith is vocal. It's not silent, it's not passive. Faith speaks in the direction of what it believes, not what it sees. Faith says, "I am becoming." Faith says, "There is more ahead." Faith says, "This moment doesn't define me." Faith declares truth before the evidence changes. It disrupts the emotional script. It refuses to let the old story take the stage again. You don't need everything around you to change for you to change your language. The shift begins when you stop narrating from a place of defeat and start speaking from a place of design. God didn't create you to keep rereading the lines of your last heartbreak. You were created to evolve, to speak life into dry places, to call things that are not as though they were. That means sometimes your words will sound too big for your current reality. That's okay. Growth always sounds too bold to the version of you that's shrinking. Your old mindset will try to tell you that's not who you are. But your future is asking, why not? Why not speak in the direction of freedom? Why not shift from saying, "I'm not good enough," to "I'm learning, I'm growing, and I'm capable"? Why not cancel the script that says you're hard to love and speak instead, "I am worthy of love and I am learning how to receive it"? Why not stop saying, "I always mess it up," and begin saying, "I'm giving myself grace to try again"? These are not just motivational statements. They are acts of war against every lie that ever tried to bury your voice. The script you choose to read shapes the emotion you live in. When you change the words, you shift the weight. The heaviness lifts because your soul is no longer being choked by language that doesn't align with your future. Some of the peace you're praying for is waiting behind a different sentence. Some of the healing you're hoping for is on the other side of a new narrative, not because language is magic, but because language is alignment. When you start speaking what is true about who you're becoming, you activate emotions that support the vision. You start to feel differently, not because everything is perfect, but because your words are no longer betraying your hope. You become more emotionally stable when your language stops contradicting your purpose. You no longer fall apart every time something goes wrong because your script has shifted. You're not rehearsing disaster. You're rehearsing discipline. You're not speaking from fear, you're speaking from wisdom. You're not narrating pain, you're narrating process. And the more you speak in alignment with who you're becoming, the more your heart learns to believe in the possibility of change. It's not about being positive for the sake of sounding nice. It's about being intentional with your voice because you know your mouth is the microphone of your soul, and the soul listens. It leans in. Every time you speak, your soul asks, is this where we're going? And if all you ever speak is fear and failure, your soul will believe that's your destination. But when you start speaking strength, hope, and resilience, your soul adjusts. Your emotions adjust. You begin to embody the new story because you're no longer reading from the old one. This is what transformation looks like, not just in actions, but in articulation. What you say is either helping you become or keeping you behind. So shift the script, speak in the direction of your healing, and watch your emotions rise to meet the words. Emotion is not just something that happens to you, it's something that responds to you. And one of the most overlooked truths about emotional healing and transformation is this. Your emotions often follow your expressions. The way you speak, the tone you carry, the words you choose. They all send instructions to your emotional state. If you constantly speak with defeat in your voice, then your emotions will sink into that posture. If you let hopelessness slip from your lips over and over again, don't be surprised when heaviness begins to hang over your days like a cloud that won't lift. Your mouth becomes the map your emotions follow. We live in a time when people are constantly being told to follow their heart, to trust their feelings, to listen to their emotions. But what if your emotions are only repeating what you've been feeding them? What if your feelings are not facts, but echoes of what you've been expressing in private moments of frustration, anger, bitterness, and fear? What if your mouth has trained your feelings to operate in dysfunction? You might think you're just venting, just being honest, just expressing yourself. But your emotions are always listening, always reacting, always adapting. They move toward the energy you release through your words. If you say, I'm overwhelmed, again and again, your emotions will start performing that feeling. If you keep saying, I'm broken, your emotions will carry the weight of that declaration. If you keep saying, I can't take this anymore, then your emotions will begin to shut down your endurance. This isn't about superstition or denial. It's about awareness, because just as much as your emotions can influence your words can also lead your emotions. It works both ways. The problem is, most people let their emotions drive the language, never realizing they're handing over the keys to something unstable, something unanchored, something unhealed. You've got to be intentional about how you speak when you're feeling low, because those are the moments when careless words have the most power. The times when your emotions feel out of control are the very times when your words need to be grounded in truth. Because your emotions will always want to declare how things feel right now, but your spirit needs your words to declare what is true, what is possible, what is coming. You cannot let temporary feelings create permanent declarations. Just because you feel unloved doesn't mean you are. Just because you feel like giving up doesn't mean you should. Just because you feel like you're failing doesn't mean you're not growing. And if your mouth can learn how to speak beyond what you feel, your emotions will start to follow that new rhythm. Think about a thermostat and a thermometer. A thermometer just reports the current temperature. It has no power to change anything. A thermostat, on the other hand, sets the temperature. It establishes a standard and causes everything in the room to respond. When you let your mouth be a thermometer, all it does is repeat what your emotions are currently experiencing. But when your mouth becomes a thermostat, it starts setting the tone. It speaks peace in the middle of chaos. It declares hope in the middle of fear. It calls for strength even when you feel weak. And over time, your emotions begin to respond to the new atmosphere you've created through your words. Some people stay stuck in emotional pain not because healing isn't possible, but because their language is rehearsing the wound. They wake up every day and unknowingly replay the narrative of their suffering. They speak it over their lives, they speak it into their decisions, they speak it into their relationships, and that expression creates emotional momentum. Their emotions don't know how to move forward because their words keep pulling them backward. But just as the wrong words can keep you trapped, the right words can set you free. Speaking life, speaking truth, speaking strength. It's not just motivational talk. It's emotional strategy, it's spiritual warfare, it's breaking the cycle with your own voice. There's something powerful that happens when you say things like, "I am healing," even when you still feel broken. Your emotions hear that and begin to stretch toward that healing. When you say, "I'm stronger than I think," your soul leans into that belief. When you say, "I will not be defined by this moment," your emotions start to detach from the trauma and reconnect with hope. And you don't need an audience to do this. You don't need applause or affirmation. Sometimes the most transformational expressions happen in silence. In your room, in your car, on a walk, when no one else is listening but your spirit and your feelings. Speak anyway, speak especially then. This doesn't mean you'll never have hard days. It doesn't mean you fake happiness or ignore grief. It means you give your emotions something stable to hold on to, something beyond the storm of the moment. You're not ignoring reality. You're leading it. You're not pretending. It's positioning. You're positioning your emotions to align with healing instead of staying stuck in pain. It might feel awkward at first, unnatural even. But expression is a habit, and just like you've trained your emotions to follow despair, you can train them to follow hope. Have you ever noticed how music affects your emotions? One song can lift your mood or pull you into nostalgia or sadness. That's the power of expression. Words do the same thing. When you speak them, they become soundtracks in your mind. You start living by those lyrics. So what are you singing over your life? What are you declaring out loud on repeat? Because the soundtrack of your speech is guiding the choreography of your emotions. Some of us have been dancing to the wrong track for too long. We've been rehearsing loss. We've been reciting fear. We've been mumbling rejection, and our emotions have followed that lead, step by painful step. But what if you change the music? What if your mouth started playing a new rhythm, a rhythm of faith, a rhythm of restoration, a rhythm of forward movement? Your emotions might not change overnight, but they will begin to adjust because your feelings are listening. They're always listening. They're responding to the frequency of yours. You may not always control what you feel in the moment. Emotions are real and they deserve space, but they don't deserve full control. You can honor your emotions without surrendering to them. You can feel deeply and still speak wisely. You can hurt and still declare healing. You can cry and still proclaim courage, because the true strength isn't in denying emotion. It's in directing it, and the direction begins with your expression. When your mouth speaks what your spirit knows is true, your emotions begin to rise to that truth. You're no longer living at the mercy of your mood, or moving with intention. You're building a new emotional reality with every word you choose to release. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. In a world that constantly pressures us to speak, to respond, to explain, to defend, there is deep, transformative power in sacred silence. We often think silence is weakness, that being quiet is the same as being passive, or that holding our tongue means we're avoiding confrontation. But that's not always true. Sometimes silence is not weakness. It's wisdom. It's protection. It's positioning. There are battles you win by not engaging. There are emotional storms you outlast by not feeding them with your voice. When you're in pain, when you're overwhelmed, when you're angry, your first instinct might be to speak, to react, to prove your point, to express every raw emotion, and while that might feel good for a moment, those words can often do more damage than healing, not just to others, but to yourself, because once you say something, you give it power. You give it energy, you give it life, and not all emotions deserve to be spoken into existence. Some feelings are temporary, but the words they produce can leave permanent marks. That's why silence, when used with intention, is not avoidance. It's authority. It's your way of saying, I will not give this moment more power than it deserves. There is a stillness that can only be found when you're quiet long enough to hear your own soul. When you stop filling the space with noise, you begin to hear truth. You begin to hear clarity, and more importantly, you begin to hear God. Because while the world is loud, divine wisdom often comes in whispers. It comes when you're still, when you stop reacting, when you stop defending, when you stop trying to win the argument or control the narrative. That kind of silence is not passive, it's strategic. It's choosing to rise above the chaos instead of sinking into it. Not everything deserves a response. Not every critic deserves your energy. Not every emotion needs to be verbalized. There's a sacred discipline in learning to be still when your emotions want to scream, to breathe when your anger wants to speak, to pause when your pride wants to clap back. That's strength, that's maturity, that's self-control in its highest form, and it's in those quiet moments, those decisions to hold your peace, that real transformation begins. Silence gives you space to process. It gives you room to observe instead of react. When you rush to speak, you often speak from emotion, not wisdom. But when you pause, when you allow a moment of silence between what you feel and what you say, you create space for discernment. You allow your better self, your healed self, your mature self to show up and respond instead of your wounded self reacting. And sometimes that healed self chooses not to respond at all. There's power in not needing the last word. There's freedom in not explaining yourself to everyone. There's grace in letting God defend you instead of using your words to defend your own name. The more you grow, the more you realize that silence is not absence, it's presence. It's a deep kind of presence that doesn't need approval, doesn't chase validation, and doesn't seek attention. It's confidence that whispers, I know who I am, and I don't need to prove it to you. We often confuse noise with strength. We think people who talk the most have the most authority, but true authority doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need to perform. It simply is. Think about the most impactful moments of your life. Chances are, some of them were marked not by what was said, but by the silence that followed. The silence in a hospital room, the silence after a deep revelation, the silence during heartbreak, the silence in prayer. Those moments weren't empty, they were sacred. They were full of meaning, and your emotional healing requires those sacred silences too. Your mouth is a gateway. Every word that leaves your lips carries weight. When you speak from a place of brokenness, you invite that brokenness to stay. When you speak from a place of anger, you stir more chaos into the atmosphere. But when you choose silence, you interrupt the cycle. You refuse to add more weight to the heaviness already present. You stop the emotional spiral, you reset the rhythm, and in that stillness, clarity rises. There's something deeply spiritual about choosing to be quiet in moments when you used to explode, when you used to lash out, when you used to defend yourself at all costs. That shift from reaction to reflection is the evidence of healing. It's the sign that you are no longer living under the control of your emotions. You are rising above them, you are leading them, and sometimes leadership looks like stillness. It looks like biting your tongue. It looks like walking away. It looks like not texting back. It looks like going into prayer instead of going into battle. The world tells you to say something, to post something, to prove your side, to tell your truth. But wisdom often whispers, be still, let the truth speak for itself, let time reveal what words never could, let God handle what your voice can't reach, because the truth is, not everything is your assignment to fix. Not every situation requires your commentary. Sometimes your silence will speak louder than anything you could have said. It will communicate peace, it will communicate power, it will communicate growth. And let's be honest, there are moments when you simply don't have the right words yet. When you're overwhelmed, grieving, processing, growing. You don't always know what to say, and that's okay. Silence is not a weakness in those moments. It's protection. It's giving yourself time to catch up to what you're feeling. It's allowing space for the spirit to speak before your ego does. It's choosing not to weaponize your voice just because you feel wounded. We often speak prematurely. We speak while emotions are still swirling, while our hearts are still bleeding, while our vision is still blurry, and then we regret it. We wish we had paused. We wish we had thought more, prayed more, listened more. That regret teaches us the value of silence. It reminds us that maturity isn't just about knowing what to say, it's knowing when to say nothing at all. Sometimes silence is how you take your power back. When someone tries to provoke you and you don't respond, you win. When life gets loud and you choose to remain centered, you're not avoiding. You're anchoring. You're creating space for peace to rise. You're honoring your healing process. You're refusing to let noise dictate your direction, and in that silence, you're not just preserving your energy or protecting your purpose. There's a stillness that can only be found when you stop reacting and start listening. Listening to your soul, listening to wisdom, listening to God, and in that listening you realize something powerful. Your voice is most effective when it is submitted to truth, not driven by emotion. Your silence is not the absence of a voice. It's the presence of restraint, the evidence of inner strength. It's the space where your emotions are no longer controlling you and your spirit begins to lead.